Could you start by explaining a little bit about how you came up with the idea?
Yeah, for me, the idea of Super Size Me was inspired on Thanksgiving 2002. I was sitting on my mother's couch in West Virginia, where I grew up. And Thanksgiving is a fantastic holiday in America. This wonderful gluttonous holiday where we just stuff ourselves with food and then lay around on the couch all afternoon watching football. And it's also the great thing about this holiday is it's the one day in America where everyone actually cooks. We dust off the pots and pans and we actually use them for that one day. And so it's so ironic that I came up with the idea of the film on that day. I was sitting on the couch when a news story came on about the lawsuits.
Right.
And these lawsuits, there were these two girls in America who were suing McDonald's, who said, we're overweight, we're sick, we're obese, and it's your fault. And was blaming McDonald's. And when I first heard about the lawsuit months earlier, I thought they were absolutely ludicrous. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard of in my life. That suddenly we're going to sue a food company that sells us food that we buy, that we eat, and then blame them for it. But the more I started hearing about the lawsuits, the more I started hearing about McDonald's marketing practices, how they really target kids from such a young age, the way they manufacture their food, how so many ingredients go into something as simple as a chip or a chicken McNugget. They're less than openness, they're less than forwardness about the nutritional content of their food. I said, you know what? I may not agree with a lawsuit because I'm not a litigious person, but there's a basis here for an argument. There's definitely a basis to have an argument. And so I was sitting on the couch, Thanksgiving 2002, when a spokesperson from McDonald's comes on TV now and starts talking about the suits. And the spokesman says, listen, you can't link our food to these girls being sick. You can't link our food to these girls being obese. Our food is healthy, it's nutritious, it's good for you. And I said, well, if it's that good for you, then realistically, shouldn't I be able to eat it for 30 days straight with no side effects? Shouldn't I be able to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, dessert, the works, live the all-American lifestyle of overeating and under-exercising and be fine? So that's what I did.
So you always intended yourself to be the guinea pig?
I did. From the minute I had the idea, I thought it would be me because, for a few reasons. One, I would never ask somebody to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. That was one of the big reasons. And the bigger reason, and the other reason too, is since I funded the whole film myself, I didn't really want to pay somebody to go through this whole process. And lastly, I couldn't trust that if it was somebody else, the minute the cameras weren't rolling and the doors were closed and he was in his apartment in the closet, that he wouldn't be sneaking like broccoli or cauliflower when nobody was looking. So, and I knew that if it was me, that I would stay the course, that I would be true to what we wanted to accomplish, which was just eating this diet for a month.
So how did you actually sort out the finances? You just said that you obviously financed it yourself, but were there any problems involved with that?
No. We had a show on MTV right before this. The show got canceled in October of 2002. It was a show called I Bet You Will. And when this show got canceled, after we did 53 episodes for the network and we had this little pile of money, I said, let's take this money and make a movie. And it was great. The only approval I needed was mine. And, we had all of the equipment that we needed. Like we owned our own cameras. We own our own editing equipment. The DP that actually shot the whole film was the second person I called. The day that I got the idea, I told my girlfriend first, my vegan girlfriend who was sitting on the couch next to me, and I said, I got a great idea for a movie. And she said, you are not going to do that. And by this stage, I was already running through the house, and I picked up the phone and I called Scott, and I told him the idea, and when he stopped laughing, he said, wow, that's a really great bad idea. And so that was our running mantra, throughout the film. So I had the DP on board from the very beginning, and so from then on, the biggest expense we had was travel. We traveled to about 15 states while making the film, interviewing a variety of experts, in the field. So the majority of our costs ended up being, airline, hotels, rent-a-cars, stuff like that.
So had you always been inclined to eat fast food anyway when you were younger? Or?
Well, I grew up in a house where my mom cooked every day. My mom cooked dinner every day, period. Every dinner was in our house, and you didn't miss dinner, or mom was going to be putting a foot in your ass. That was what it was. You were at home for dinner, period. And it was an important thing for me growing up, having dinner at home. And for me, that's where my food education really began. It was around the dinner table. This food is good for you and this isn't. You should eat this much of this food, but not this much of this. And that's gone in America today. This dinner table, this preliminary education to health, I think. And so for me, fast food was a rarity. It was one of those things that maybe once a month, you know, when mom didn't feel like cooking or mom was tired or sick, you know, or something, that's when we'd go out to eat, you know, and we would get fast food. And it was fantastic. It was this great, fantastic journey that we would get to go on, you know, to McDonald's or Burger Chef, which was a huge chain in the state where I grew up that we loved. And anytime we went out to dinner was special. And what's happening now in the States especially is that special time, that special trip to a restaurant is every day.
Yeah, I think it's very similar, obviously, in the UK.
Yeah,
but I mean, you just said you've obviously been travelling around a number of McDonald's outlets, but did you ever have any trouble filming in any of those stores?
No, it was incredible. We would just walk right in. You know, we would walk right in and shoot. And once in a while, maybe in New York was probably where, you know, which New York is a very media savvy and media paranoid, you know, city at the same time. So you walk in with a camera in New York City, suddenly people are like, what are you doing with that camera? What are you get out of here. You can't have that in here. But, you know, once we started filming outside of the city in the Midwest, you know, people would be like, well, what are you doing? What are you doing with that camera? We're making a movie. Oh, what about? Oh, we're making a film about me traveling around the country eating McDonald's. Oh, that's cool. This is the manager, Bob, over here. And there'd be Bob on the fry machine. You know, it's like they didn't care.
So they saw it as a kind of promotional video?
Yeah, they just thought it was, you know, some two guys having a lark, you know, traveling around making a film about McDonald's, and you know, didn't really give it a thought. And even McDonald's, you know, when we tried to call them to get an interview with them, I think they just kind of shrugged it off, like, who is this guy, this Morgan Spurlock guy? You know, he had a show on MTV, you know, but who is he? We're not going to talk to him. You know, what's he going to do? And you know, I think these days they probably wish they would have just sat down and given us an interview.
I imagine. But, I mean, what are your thoughts though about the addictiveness of the food? I mean, do you think it's a kind of corporate strategy, or is it much more of a commercial, common sense type thing?
I mean, I think it's a little of both. I think we are so marketed. I think we're so heavily inundated with messaging about this food that you just want to buy it. You know, that you buy what you're sold, and the most heavily advertised foods are what are consumed the most. You know, that's the fact. And I don't really believe that they add all of this extra stuff to it to make it more addictive, you know, or to make you crave it. But I think that if you eat a diet heavy in fast food, or, you know, heavy in fat, sugar, caffeine, salt, you know, sodium, your body will start to crave these things. And I look at just how I felt over the course of this diet. You know, the more that I ate, the more I wanted it. And, you know, a lot of this food is completely devoid of nutritional value. You know, the vitamins and minerals that your body really needs aren't there. You know, they're just not in the food. You know, I really you know, liken this to when you're a kid and you see the sugary cereals commercials.
Oh, God,
and
yes.
Here's these fantastic sugary cereals that we loved as a kid. You know, for me, Captain Crunch, which was one of my favorite cereals growing up, it was just this complete bowl of sugary corn things. But they always say the part of a balanced breakfast. And the balanced breakfast, when you look at the commercial, there's a glass of milk beside it, and a glass of juice, and some toast, and a piece of fruit. If you take the sugary cereal away, this is still part of a balanced breakfast, you know, and that's what fast food is. You know, the fast food, they say it's part of a balanced diet, and the balanced diet is everything else that you eat. It's not this food; it's everything else you surround yourself with that makes this part of a balanced diet.
Yeah.
But we don't think that way anymore. We look at this food as a meal. You know, if you walk in the stores, it's a value meal. That's how they sell it up on the board, and so you think you're getting everything you need in a meal. Yeah. And we have turned this into a consistent part of our diet, where it shouldn't be.
Well, it's those other incentives, and I remember as a boy, actually, the cereals I would buy were the ones with the free gifts.
With the toys.
And it seems to work exactly the same way on McDonald's.
It is exactly the same way. You know, you want the cereal that has the toys, the little fishing pole, the Matchbox cars that are all inside. And, you know, this is exactly how these fast food restaurants, and McDonald's especially, markets to kids. You know, they say, well, it's the parents' responsibility. They always love to blame parents. It's the parents' fault. Last time I checked, my mom didn't have $1.4 billion to shove her messaging down my throat every single day. Last time I checked, she wasn't giving me a toy every time I sat down to dinner. You know, last time I checked, she didn't build a jungle gym in the front yard for us to play on, you know, just to make sure we were there for dinner. You know, all of these little incentives play a part in the nag factor of getting a kid to say, Mom, 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 take me, take me, take me, take me. And finally a mom says, God, okay, fine, we'll go. You know, and that's what they play into. They play into this nag factor of making this a reality.
Yeah. Now, I mean, the film obviously focuses particularly on McDonald's, but do you think the findings of the research could be applied to any fast food company?
Yeah, this could have happened anywhere. I mean, this could have happened at a Burger King, at a Taco Bell, you know, you name it, any of these chain restaurants, and even like a fast casual chains, like you get these places in the States like Outback Steakhouses and Applebee's and Chili's. It could have happened at any of those as well. The fact is we get giant portions. We eat more than we need. It's food that's loaded with fat and sugar, and we make poor choices. For me, that's what the film is really about. And I picked McDonald's specifically because they are the industry leader. They are the biggest. And this is an industry that is about follow the leader. Whatever the leader does, everybody follows suit. And McDonald's feeds 46 million people every day. 3/4 of the entire population of England daily. That's a large, incredible number of people to feed on a daily basis. I think they feed just 3 million in England every day. Just here.
Yeah.
So, when you start to think about that number of people that are getting fed, that's really incredible. And so for me, I picked them because whatever they do, everyone follows suit. They came out with supersizing, all the other chains came out with supersizing. They came out with the value meal, everybody else has value meals. They came out with the Chicken McNugget, everybody else has Chicken McNuggets. So I picked the company that in my mind could most easily institute change across the board, across the industry, if they wanted to.
So, how has McDonald's obviously reacted since the film has come out, or since it was first shown, obviously, in Sundance?
Yeah.
And obviously it's affected their profits, I assume, but also their future strategies?
I think so. I think that it has really caused them to roll out their healthier menu items on an expedited rate. And I put healthy in quotation marks when I say this because people really need to look at the fine print when it comes to some of these salads. In the United States, 8 out of the 13 salads that they sell get half of their calories from fat. In the UK here, if you look at the nutritional information for the salads here, it's almost the same. I think it's like 4 of the salads get almost half of their calories are coming from fat. Once you add the dressing to the salads, to most of the salads, you're getting more than half of your entire day's worth of sodium in one sitting in a salad. So you have to question the quote unquote healthiness of the food when you look at the salads that they're selling. These new healthy menu options that they're pushing. Yes. So for me, but anytime you can get somebody to eat a salad, it's a step in the right direction. Putting deep fried chicken on it, I question the healthiness of that. But maybe you should get it without the chicken. Maybe that's a step in the right direction. And why do we have to have chicken on all the salads? It's like in the States, there's only like one salad. Now I think there's 2, but the other one now has like all this ground beef syrup all over the top of it. The Fiesta salad that you can get. You don't have to have that on a salad. There's other ways to make a healthy salad without putting chicken on it. But especially in America, we've been so convinced that you have to have some sort of meat at every meal. That they have to. They have to have the chicken on there to make people want it. To make people want it as a full meal. McDonald's in the States has also eliminated the supersizing. By the end of this year, there'll be no more supersizes. And this, just so everybody here can see, this. Oh, that's not it. This is it. This is a supersize soda in America. This is the largest in the UK.
Right.
Look at that. In the U.S., this is a medium. So in between this and this, there's still a whole other cup size right here in between that. So we wonder, we're like, wow, I don't understand. Why are we gaining so much weight? What's happening? Well, when you drink 1.5 liters of soda a day, some people are even drinking 2 or 3 of these. When you're drinking that much soda, something that has complete empty calories, there's no nutritional value in the soda whatsoever. It's loaded with sugar, corn syrup, whatever else is thrown in there, It's doing nothing for you except like giving you that nice little piece of America right here, right there. Everybody's getting their piece of America right there around their midsection.
And we are slowly across the world. So do you think actually the reaction is different in different countries around the world?
Well, what's been interesting in Europe is everybody in all the McDonald's in Europe, you'll say, well, this is an American problem. This isn't about us. We don't even have supersizing here. And so my response is, wow, I didn't know they made Big Macs that much healthier here in London. I didn't realize suddenly here they were the light Big Macs. The fact is there's no way to make a healthy deep fried French fry. It's still deep fried. It's still the exact same thing. You may not have these giant sodas, a supersized soda, but you still have all the same fare that is sold in America.
Yeah.
That still has all the same problems.
So, what do you think has been the public reaction so far?
The greatest thing that's come out of the public reaction from the film is people coming out, wanting to take more responsibility for their lives. People aren't coming out of this movie saying, I knew it, give me a lawyer, I'm suing McDonald's right now. That's not what I wanted to have happen. I wanted people to come out of this saying, I need to do something about this. I need to do something about my life. And that's important, because it's a two-way street. There's a huge amount of personal responsibility and there's a huge amount of corporate responsibility, both which need to be addressed. And that's what I ask in the film, is where do you draw that line between personal and corporate responsibility? And people who come out of the movie really are impacted by it. They say, I need to take better care of me. I need to pay more attention to what I eat, how I live. I need to exercise more. Parents are coming out of the film saying, you know what, I need to be a better role model to my kids. I need to cook more at home. I need to go down to my kids' school on Monday morning because I have no idea what they're feeding my kids. And that's important. I think that's important.
I mean, your girlfriend is obviously a nutritionist and helped you get back into shape.
Yeah,
which,
a vegan.
no bad
She's
thing.
a vegan chef.
Has that mean you've turned into a vegan now?
Oh my gosh, no.
No.
I'm a carnivore at heart. I grew up in West Virginia, where in the States, West Virginia, if you can catch it, you can eat it. That's the rules. So no, I love a good steak. I love a good burger.
Yeah.
I just don't eat those all the time. For
Yeah.
me, I try and live a healthier lifestyle, and that doesn't include eating a lot of steak.
But have there been any long-lasting effects? And in fact, have you had any withdrawal symptoms to start with?
Well, when I went off the diet, it's amazing. When I quit eating the food, for the first 3 days, I experienced some really serious withdrawal symptoms. Much like a drug addict or an alcoholic would feel. But during the movie, I would get these incredible headaches, these massive headaches that would just envelop my entire skull. And the minute I would eat the food, the headaches would go away, which that's frightening to think about. And then so at the end of the diet, when I went off the food, when I stopped eating, around midnight that night, you see me in the film go do my final blood test on the first day afterwards, and I was fine during the day, and around midnight that night, the headaches kicked in. And they progressively got worse over the next day. They lasted about a day and a half to the point where the migraine just enveloped my whole head and went down into my body. My whole body started to ache. Like it just hurt. I hurt all over. I had periods of sweating, of the shakes, and that's amazing to think that that my body had gotten so used to this type of a diet, this high fat, high sugar, high sodium, massive caffeine diet, that it was saying, where's that stuff? Where's that stuff that we had? We want that again. And I'm not a big believer that that McDonald's is adding things that make the food addictive to their customers or their consumers. I just believe that when you eat a diet that is heavily laden with fat and sugar and caffeine, your body will start to want it. And that's what's happened in America. Because consistently in America, we find ourselves, and I know people every day, I do it myself. In the afternoon, I'll be like, I need to go get a cup of coffee. And we'll go get a coffee. People say, I need a snack. We're a huge snacking culture in America now, so is the world.
Same here.
Yeah, and the rest of the world's following suit. You're at your desk and you're snacking all afternoon, and you're like, I need a snack. I need to go down the street and get something. So they go down to the Starbucks and they get their giant Moco Choco Laccacinos or whatever the Frappadappas things are with it's like these giant coffees with ice cream on the top and whipped cream, and they got caramel syrup on there. And so you get yourself this coffee that's 700 calories in itself. It's like a meal right there. And then you're like, wow, and let me get a big piece of cake too, because this isn't enough. I need some cake to go with it. And so you get a big piece of cake that's covered in icing. And so now you've got your 1,500 calorie snack just to tide you over till dinner.
Yeah, you're making me feel guilty now.
Yeah.
But how has the success of the film surprised you?
It's completely exceeded all my expectations in every way. I thought we made a good movie. And just for us to have gotten into the Sundance Film Festival last year was phenomenal for me. And at Sundance, the movie completely took off and has just been a whirlwind ever since. To think that this film that we made for $65,000, that's what it cost, $65,000 American, is now being seen in countries all around the world and is having an impact on people the way it is just, it's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. No, it's going to be wonderful to see how it does, continues to do when it opens in the UK.
Yeah.
But would you do it all again?
If I was starting blind again and had no idea what would happen, yeah, sure. But knowing what I know now, it's like I can't say. I don't know. Probably not.